In a recent video, I laid these paving slabs in this area around the back of my workshop because it was nothing but a dumping ground and it was full of weeds, but I can make good use of this space because it's pretty wide. I've got about a metre of width here, so I'm going to be building some storage racks along this wall here. I've got plenty of length here, about 6 metres, but the racks are going to have to be quite narrow. I'm thinking maybe 400, 450 millimetres because obviously I still need space to walk in front of them. I do want to be able to store some really long lengths of timber though, so I need to figure out a way of building some individual racks that can store long lengths when placed together. This project began with a huge salvaged wood haul. Someone on Facebook Marketplace wanted to get rid of all this old decking. These are mostly 120 by 27mm thick deck boards, but there were also some 4x4s and it'd be rude not to take some of that firewood too. It might look like this wood is filthy, maybe even rotten to the untrained eye, but we'll find out later what condition it's in once I get it cleaned up. I did accidentally introduce lots of spiders and bugs to my car, which I'm still finding now, several weeks later. But getting this amount of timber for free and saving it from becoming someone else's firewood was too appealing to pass up. Before I can use it though, there's a lot of work to do. I need to remove thousands of nails. An old dust cloth in a bin is perfect to stop the nails flying around the workshop at great speed, because I'm going to be using my pneumatic denailing tool. This thing is pretty good value. I got it on Amazon and I wouldn't be without it now. I'll link to it in the description box. If you are a salvager like me and you have an air compressor, they are really good tools. I ended up with all these which are up to 1.5 metre lengths and all these which are 2.4 metres long. And I used my pressure washer to get rid of the dirt and mildew. They cleaned up pretty well. I probably could have done better if I'd have used some cleaning solution on them first, but I'm not looking for perfection here. I just want to get rid of the worst of it. It's a shame that a lot of people who want wooden decks in their garden don't take the time to clean and maintain them properly. But I guess if they did, I probably wouldn't have been lucky enough to get all this. Before I can use those, I need to build some leg frames, and I have some 2x2s left over from the recent Catio build. These long bits will be my uprights, and these shorter bits join them together at the top and the bottom to form a rectangle, and I'm using some polyurethane glue which works well for exterior projects. And I'm going to add some plastic feet to the bottom to lift them up so that they don't suck up moisture from the ground. I want my racks to each be 1.5 metres in length, and I found a board that measured 1.5 metres that I could offer up to check against the others so that I can pull out all of the ones that are long enough. This method of cutting 4 boards at a time is great, but you have to be really careful that the boards don't shift or skew while you're cutting them. I did find one small area of rot on about 3 boards which I'll cut away, but other than that they were all in great condition. I made up this little jig to allow me to mark up the thickness of one decking board plus the 2x2 which will help me measure and position things. Measuring between the 2 lines tells me the length I need to cut some more of the boards, and I'll use these boards to double up the thickness of each of the longer boards. I use my jig again to position them and then add some polyurethane glue, just a little bead will do. And because I'm lucky enough to have a framing nailer, I'm going to use that to pin the boards together. These are 51mm galvanised nails that I'm using here. But if you don't have a framing nailer, it's easy to drive them in by hand, it just takes a bit longer. Doubling up these beams has made them really rigid, no flex in them at all, which is going to allow me to load up the shelves with some really heavy stuff. To assemble the racks, more polyurethane glue, and I bought some 70mm coach screws. These are self-drilling, but I didn't want to split the boards as I'm driving them in quite close to the end of the boards, so I drilled some pilot holes to be on the safe side. These bits of plywood are spacers so that I can get all the middle shelves positioned consistently, as I want each rack to be identical. The top board isn't going to need to support much weight as it's only going to be supporting the roof, so for those I'm just using single boards without doubling them up. But you'll see they have the same overhang at each side as the beams do. I can then flip it over and do the same on the other side. When you cut into pressure treated timber, it's important to apply some treatment to the end grain to protect the wood from insects and rot. I'm using a treatment by Sikkens, which I'll leave a link to in the description box. Before these get any heavier, I'm going to get them positioned. I cut these shorter pieces which I can use as cladding on the sides. You'll see here I had a bit too much of an overhang in places, and that's because I realised that some of my 2x2s were bigger than others, so the jig that I was using earlier unfortunately caused me some problems, but I trimmed off the excess off camera with a circular saw, so all is well. So out of the 3 racks, the 2 that are going to be positioned on each end, I decided to add some more cladding pieces too, which will allow airflow through the gaps, but also help to screen off whatever's going to be stored in here in future. And I cut more short pieces as slats for the shelves. The method I like to use to get everything evenly spaced is to first place a board in the centre, then one at each end, and then I can figure out how many boards to add to fill the gaps, and just space them apart equally by eye. No maths required and no spacers needed either. I found some short offcuts of 6x2 in my wood storage rack. And I'm going to cut these to the depth of my racks using the table saw. I can then rip them in half to give me 2 pieces from each board, mark up a diagonal line, and then cut along that line with the circular saw. And these are going to be perfect to use as furring strips to give the roof a bit of an angle so that rain runs off it. Before I fit the furring strips though, I need to get the racks sitting level, and I did that by clamping my spirit level to the top rail to lift the racks in line with each other. And I've got some glazing packers which I'll use as shims underneath the plastic feet. And then with everything positioned, I drill holes through the side rails and add some M8 bolts to tie them all together. And I did this at the bottom too. I bought some of these bituminous roof sheets to cover the top. These are the cheapest roof sheets that I can find. They're also lightweight. I only needed 2 sheets. I just need to cut them down into 550mm lengths with the angle grinder. I can then secure the first furring strip and offer up the sheets to figure out where to place some noggins, which will support the furring strips at consistently spaced intervals and in the right place so that the corrugation in the sheet is fully supported by it. Each of these sheets is going to be supported by 3 furring strips, spaced about 350mm apart, but even that was not enough to stop them sagging at the front, so I'll need to find a solution to that later. I also needed to make a cutout to fit around this brick pillar. And it slotted in nicely under the capping stone. I added some masking tape to each corrugation that would need securing down. This is just so that I can see where the screws need to be added, so that I don't drive any in the wrong places. And I'm using some 70mm roof screws. These have a rubber washer around them to stop any water coming in. As you can see, it's very wobbly at the moment, and my solution to this was to add a 50mm roof batten. I had one that was 4.8 meters long enough to span the entire length of the racks, and this is going to straighten things up nicely. I still had a bit of a high spot in a couple of places, but I imagine this will settle over time with the sheets heating up in the sun. These racks are going to be useful for storing all the salvaged timber that I've never been able to find space for. I have these roof battens that came off our old roof, which today always seem to be in the way no matter where I put them. A big pile of firewood, all the 4x4s that I got along with the deck boards earlier in this video. I just needed to spend some time denailing them, and the remaining deck boards too, of which there are still plenty left for future projects. As you can see, there's not a great deal of space here for loading and unloading. It's a little bit awkward, but I am able to store really long lengths here, and considering they're not going to be accessed that frequently, I'm really pleased to have some extra storage space, as I seem to accumulate salvaged wood quicker than I'm able to use it at the moment, which is a nice problem to have. In total, I spent £30 on the 2 roof sheets and £9 on the roofing screws. Everything else was either salvaged or it was stuff that I already had. Thank you for watching.